A new TV show fronted by an out-and-out villain protagonist can be a tough sell, so showrunners like to keep their cards close to their chest. A lot more often, we are sold on good-hearted or more ambiguous figures who, as the seasons wear on, become increasingly more suspicious. We thought they killed bad people for good reasons, not the other way around, the horror! By the time these characters left our screens, viewers had witnessed an unexpected slow-motion heel turn, forcing everyone to consider how they felt about spending several years clinging to every word of, and possibly even rooting for, such an ultimately detestable character. In many ways, this could be exactly the conversation the creators wanted to open up, while in others, perhaps they didn't quite realise quite how loathsome their anti-hero protagonists would become. In either case, these are the good guys gone bad. I am the bad guy, Ash from What Culture, and these are 10 TV shows you didn't realise were following the villain. 10. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is an especially interesting case to consider, given that the main reason audiences were surprised at Daenerys Targaryen's final season heel turn is that the poor writing made it feel so sudden and contrived. Dany's arc over the course of the show saw her transformed from victim to fierce protector of the downtrodden, with the eventual goal of claiming the Iron Throne. She certainly wasn't afraid to take the lives of those who had wronged her or others, though Dany became decidedly less sympathetic in Season 8 when she underwent a hugely unpopular personality transplant. After living through the deaths of Missandei and her dragon Rhaegal, and also learning that Jon Snow had a stronger claim to the throne than her, Dany quickly descended into murderous madness, torching King's Landing, and most of the audience's hard-bought sympathy for her along with it. This wasn't Daenerys Stormborn of House Targaryen, the first of her name, Queen of the Andals and the First Men, Protector of the Seven Kingdoms, the Mother of Dragons, the Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, the Unburned, the Breaker of Chains. This was just bad Dany. 9. Mad Men. It's all too apt that a TV show focused on the inner machinations of the marketing industry is itself a prime example of effective marketing. On the surface, it is easy to view Mad Men's protagonist, Don Draper, as an aspirational figure. He's handsome as hell, cuts a great figure in a suit, and spends his free time boozing, smoking, and sleeping with beautiful women. But of course, anyone who watches more than a few episodes of the show will appreciate that Don is a dubious character at best, and despite the prevailing unhappiness which follows him throughout the series, hardly a sympathetic or heroic figure at all. Beyond being an absentee father and freely philandering despite being a married man, Don fired Sal for refusing to sleep with a client, consistently abused Peggy throughout their time working together, and stole a dead man's identity to start a new life. But what truly cemented Don's villainy was the genius series finale, where it's implied that Don's detour to a hippie commune led to him cynically repurposing the tree-hugging image for Coca-Cola's iconic Hilltop commercial. It was an ending which confirmed Don to be an unrelenting emblem of gross, unchecked capitalism, of relentless ambition no matter the spiritual or material cost. 8. House of Cards. For the majority of House of Cards' first season, audiences were entirely aware that the Democratic congressman Frank Underwood was an incredibly shady figure. But in the dirty world of political maneuvering, he hardly seemed like a true villain. But that all changed irreversibly in the first season's 11th episode, when Frank murdered Peter Russo, an alcoholic congressman about to blow the whistle on Frank's scheming, even staging it to look like a suicide. While at the time many fans cried foul that this was a step too ridiculous, it was really just the tip of the iceberg given the various murders, accidents, and general life-ruining events Frank would order and even carry out himself on his road to becoming the President of the United States. And much better can't be said for his wife Claire, who, while initially a somewhat ambiguous figure, gradually reveals herself to be at least as ruthless as her husband. In any case, Underwood was not under good in the end, and caught a heap of poison for his misdeeds. 7. Black Mirror. Though Charlie Brooker's hit sci-fi series is an anthology of largely disconnected stories, it certainly has a knack for introducing audiences to seemingly sympathetic characters who turn out to be total scumbags. Among the more notable examples are White Bear, where Victoria appears to be a sympathetic figure being hunted for sport, only for the ending to reveal that she is a child murderer sentenced to undergo psychological torture on a daily basis. And then there is the infamous Shut Up and Dance, where teenager Kenny's computer is hacked, with the hackers threatening to distribute a video of him masturbating if he doesn't comply with their commands. The twist, in the end, is that Kenny was actually whacking it to entirely inappropriate and illegal content. So when his life was consequently ruined by the troll hackers, there's decidedly less sympathy from the audience. Considering how many times Charlie Brooker and company have used this rug pull device, it is impressive that they can still execute it so well. 6. The Wire. To be fair, the entire point of The Wire is that the real world doesn't have simplistic heroes or villains. But at the same time, it's also tough to defend the actions of Baltimore PD detective Jimmy McNulty by the show's 5th season. Though McNulty is shown to be an arrogant, reckless alcoholic throughout all of the show's series, his obsession with taking down drug kingpin Marlo Stanfield ultimately sees him crossing the line in an irredeemable way. In Season 5, in what is also by far the show's most controversial and ridiculous storyline, McNulty stages the murders of homeless men to look like the work of a serial killer, even mutilating corpses in the process, in the hope of receiving more department funding to continue investigating Stanfield. After his work disrupts other investigations, a guilt-ridden McNulty finally comes clean, losing his job in the process. But true to its measured realism, the series' closing montage reveals that his efforts were basically for naught because there is no stopping the game. McNulty certainly wasn't the worst character in The Wire by any means, but he took an unmistakable plunge off a cliff in the final season. 5. Weeds. Before Breaking Bad, there was Weeds, a dark comedy drama series which similarly focused on a seemingly good person doing a bad thing for the sake of their family. To begin with, protagonist Nancy Botwin was incredibly easy to sympathise with. Suddenly bereaved of her husband and struggling to provide for her 2 sons, dealing pot to make ends meet was hardly the worst thing she could have done. But over the course of the show's 8 seasons, Nancy grew into an increasingly selfish, entitled, and reckless person who needlessly put herself and her family in danger countless times over. Moreover, she was shown to be entirely aware of her screw-ups, yet refused to ever change or grow. All because she didn't want to work a regular job, basically. It's fair to say that for the show's last few seasons, many fans were simply hate-watching in order to see how Nancy would try to ruin the lives of those closest to her, and maybe finally get her comeuppance. Yet despite being a terrible parent and an even worse person, the series finale saw Nancy become filthy rich after selling her legal weed chain to Starbucks. Terrible. 4. Homeland. The entire premise of Homeland was focused on the mystery of Marine Nicholas Brody returning to the US after being held as a prisoner of war by Al-Qaeda for 8 years, while CIA officer Carrie Matheson suspects him of being turned by the enemy. And while Homeland is a series very much rooted in moral ambiguity and challenging the very notion of terrorism, there is a tipping point at which Brody is revealed to be a sure villain. In Season 1's finale, Brody plots to detonate a suicide vest which will kill Vice President Walden and others, as retaliation for a drone strike which killed 82 children in Pakistan. He decides not to detonate the vest, though does allow Walden to die in Season 2, and ultimately ends up framed for a bombing at Walden's funeral which kills 219 people, after which he is hanged for treason in Iran at the end of Season 3. Brody's legacy is certainly complicated, and the show continued on without him for many years. But to learn that he actually did have designs to blow himself up was truly one of the most shocking TV moments of the last decade. 3. The Shield. The Shield lays claim to one of the most brilliantly devious plot twists in TV history, and it happened in the show's very first episode. The series was largely marketed and presented as a familiar police procedural. But in the closing moments of the pilot, Detective Vic Mackey intentionally shoots and kills the newest member of his strike team, Terry Crowley, who had been placed in the corrupt unit in an attempt to expose their illicit dealings. It was an all-timer record-scratch moment which completely changed the tone of the series thereafter, now focused intently on the strike team's increasingly risky criminal activities, ahead of its explosive and unforgettable series finale. For a series that seemed like just another cop show on the surface, to make the cops just as bad, if not worse, than those they were chasing was a delicious surprise indeed. 2. Breaking Bad. No discussion about stealth TV villains would be complete without mentioning Breaking Bad's Walter White. Initially introduced as an incredibly sympathetic, terminally ill high school chemistry teacher who turns to cooking meth in order to secure his family's livelihood, White's arc over the course of the show sees him transformed into a savage, ruthless shadow of his former self. Over the show's 5 seasons, Walt gradually allows himself to become involved in a series of increasingly immoral, and it goes without saying, illegal activities, such as numerous counts of murder, letting Jesse's girlfriend Jane choke to death on her own vomit, and even poisoning an innocent child. But Walt's most damning act is not knowing when to quit, because as he eventually confesses, he loved the entire game, and was damn good at it too. Being Heisenberg gave Walt's life purpose beyond simply trying to amass enough cash to keep his family afloat. And though he ultimately did the right thing by saving Jesse from Uncle Jack, it hardly redeemed 5 years of increasingly indefensible behaviour. Fans themselves made excuses for Walt whilst routinely dunking on his wife Skylar, but in the end, Walt had unquestionably become the legendary villain in his own story. 1. Sons of Anarchy. The S.H.I.E.L.D. creator Kurt Sutter followed up his subversive cop drama The S.H.I.E.L.D. with the similarly provocative Sons of Anarchy, which charted biker protagonist Jackson "Jax" Teller's descent from a more ambiguous anti-hero into an out-and-out villain. Though in earlier seasons, Jax wishes to take a less violent and corrupt direction, by the show's 4th season, it is clear that Jax is propelled onto an irredeemable villain spiral. Once it's all said and done, Jax has several dozen deaths to his name, some of which were arguably, if not indisputably, unearned, made a litany of awful decisions motivated by blood-boiling anger, and ultimately just followed in his own father's ill-fated footsteps. Were there more contemptible characters on the show? Absolutely! But to look at where Jax went from first episode to last is to observe a man who was transformed from potential saviour to reckless monster. And that's our list. What other TV shows hid their villain? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash over on social media at Ash Millman, and this has been What Culture. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more villainous content. Thanks for watching.